a testimonial talking to us about her story, and it's great that you are here.
Thank you. That's my prop. I have to tell you, I'm a very emotional person, and this is a very, very emotional time for me. So, in order to protect myself, I do bring up any tissues. I need Kleenex because if I have it as a crutch, then I will start to cry. But before I go into my grandfather's story, Mr. Radas was referring to the book, The Diary of Anne Frank. How many of you have read the book? Okay, that's very gratifying. Because unfortunately, what is happening today is there is so much anti-Semitism, anti-everything, and especially denial of the Holocaust. And you are the new generation. You are the ones who are going to be carrying the truth. My grandfather's generation is gone. My mother's generation, she was 92 when she passed away 13 years ago. There are no more witnesses, or they are dying out on a daily basis. So unless we share these stories with you, the young people, their truth will die with them. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about my grandfather. I think some of it has already been told by Mr. Radat and Noor. This is my mom. Her name was Eva. My sister Kathy, myself. I looked younger in those days. And my brother John, who unfortunately passed away at a very young age. My grandfather, Shmuel Glass, was born in 1879. So if you do the math, it's quite a long time ago. His parents believed in education. And my grandfather was a very educated man. He was a cantor, the chief cantor in his synagogue. And he did some studies, as a matter of fact, in Germany. He went to the seminarium in Germany, and he spoke German at home. And one of the things that he instilled in his 8 children is education. His way of being educated is learning languages, and he often told my aunts and uncles that they are as many people as the languages they speak. And German was spoken and taught at home. As was mentioned, he was a chief cantor in Eger, but he was born in Janoshaza, and he became a cantor there at a very young age. He also had 6 young men in his choir who moved with him to Eger when he decided to move. It was the name of the family was Weiss. He had a school in his house. He raised 8 children. And he, as was mentioned, he often had not only rabbis, cantors as guests to his home, but also bishops, priests. He really believed in the universality of religion. You know, he did not have a prejudice in his bone. He was very, very well liked by the entire community. Moving forward, when the war broke out, you may know that Hungary was allied with the Germans. So most of the Hungarians were safe because they were with the Nazis, except for the Hungarian Jews. The Hungarian Jews were taken to work or slave labor camps, and that's where my grandfather ended up. On the other side of my family, my father also ended up in a labor camp, but that's a different story. And in the labor camp is where he met Mr. Lazarovich. I'm not going to go back into the story that was already mentioned about the beginning or the birth of the Haggadah, but he also had written many, many compositions. I have some copies here. I do not know how my mother was able to save these, because she was taken away to the concentration camp, but I'll get to that in a minute. So my grandfather ended up in the work labor camp, and he met Mr. Lazarevich. And then subsequently, all of the Jews from Eger were rounded up and taken to various camps. I believe there were 40,000 Jews in Eger in 1944. My mother, who had been educated, was given the opportunity to avoid being taken away because she spoke several languages. A Gentile friend of hers offered her a new passport, a new identification card that said she was a Catholic nanny and she was going to be able to move to a different place where she was not known and live her life. My mother said, no, I do not want to leave my parents. So she stayed with them. And unfortunately, she was taken to Auschwitz with her family. She was one of 8 children. And when they got to this concentration camp, my grandfather was 65 at the time. So the criterion for the Nazis was, if you're too old to work or you're a burden, then there were 2 lines when they got to the concentration camps. One line was basically straight to the gas chambers. And unfortunately, that was the fate of my grandfather and my grandmother. My mother was 23 at the time, and because she was able to work, she was spared. But spared is really not the right expression because unfortunately, she ended up in the department where Dr. Mengele was active. I don't know if you've heard about Dr. Mengele, but he was a monster. He did all kinds of experiments on the Jewish prisoners, and my mother was one of them. And the atrocities that she went through, I don't want to tell you, but it was inhuman. And my mother's main worry was that if she survived and she had children, what would happen with the children? Would they have the effects of this incredible atrocities and experiments that she had gone through? Fortunately, we came out okay. At least my sister and my brother came out okay about me, I don't know. I have some of my grandfather's compositions here, if anybody is interested in looking through them. And after the war, my mother was liberated from Auschwitz. She weighed 62 pounds. So if you can imagine what 60 pounds weighs, it's incredible. Before my grandfather was taken away, very similar to Mr. Lazarevich, he had given his compositions to a Gentile neighbor. And because he was so well liked by the community and his neighbors, they saved the compositions. When my grandfather unfortunately did not come back, my mother did, she was able to get the compositions from this person. And I have some of the original ones. Some of them unfortunately disappeared. I honestly don't know how she saved them because after the war, World War II, she went back to Hungary. She met up with my father, who had been in a forced labor camp. And then the Hungarian Revolution broke out in 1956. I was a young child. I had a younger sister, and we all escaped from Hungary with basically the clothes on our backs. So, as Noor said, he has no pictures from his family. It's pretty much the same thing. I have no pictures, except for pictures that were given to us from friends of my parents from back then. And my mother, after the revolution, we ended up in a displaced persons camp in Germany. And then we were able to move to Canada. And then after Canada, we moved to the United States. And my mother had these compositions. I don't know, as I said, I don't know how she got them. I think they were sent to her by a friend of hers who lived in Eger, a Gentile friend. And she had not heard the compositions until 2011, when they were performed in New York. And then Noor found out about the the composition, and he picked up the song from there. So that's pretty much it. I welcome any questions. I'm sure I've left out a lot of details, but as I said, it's really an honor because we can't forget. And you are the new generation. You are the ones who are going to be carrying on the truth. We'll be the ones who will determine what is true and what is not true. And for those of you who have not read Anne Frank, I encourage you, I'm giving you an assignment tonight, go out and get the book. Because unfortunately, even in this country, there are a lot of books that are being banned. And you have to read those books because they are relevant, they make you think, and you're intelligent enough to make the decision to know what is right and what is wrong. And I thank you so much for your attention. If
Do you
anybody
have
has
any questions? Yeah, I think it's.
Don't be shy, come on.
It's difficult. There was an arm.
May I ask a question?
When you were growing up,
Yes.
so when you were about, I don't know, 15, did your mom tell you, how did you find out what had happened to your mom?
You know, it's a very interesting question because unfortunately, my mom had suffered so much, and not only her physical suffering, but seeing her parents being taken away in front of her, seeing her siblings being taken away. My mother refused to talk about the Holocaust. There's a lot of things I wish I had asked her, but whenever I started to ask a question, I could see that she was very, very hurt inside, so I tried not to press. And unfortunately, there was no one else I could ask. And my mother died of Alzheimer. And if any of you have relatives who had Alzheimer, you know it's the most terrible, terrible disease. And I remember my mother at night crying out a lot for her parents. So subconsciously she knew. So there's a lot of things I don't know. I wish I had maybe the courage to ask or maybe push a little bit more. But there's a lot of emptiness, a lot of details that I'm not familiar with. There are certain things that I do know, as I said, the experiments that she went through, but a lot of other things she didn't talk about. She loved to talk about her parents because that was her pride and joy with what they had accomplished. They raised 8 kids, and unfortunately, some of them did not survive. I had an aunt who moved to Israel, an uncle who moved to Israel who had survived. He went after the war and he became a school principal in Bnei Brak. Another uncle moved to the United States and he became a cantor in New Jersey. And I had another uncle who moved to New York and he was also a cantor. So, you know, cantors run in my family. Unfortunately, I can't sing a tune, so we must have skipped a generation. Anything else?
Thank you, Julian. Thank you so much for being with us. It's such an honor to listen to your family history, and it's very courageous for you to be here to talk to us about all of this. I just have one question. How do you process this kind of intergenerational trauma? Just want to hear a little bit.
I live in Florida now, but I grew up in Brooklyn. I went to I graduated. I went to Hunker College. I graduated from Brooklyn College, and it was in an organization called Second Generation, and I belonged to that organization. And basically, I belong to a lot of different Jewish organizations, and I think by sharing, you don't carry the burden by yourself. So you share your thoughts, and sometimes you think you're the only one who had such and such an experience, and by talking to others, you know that you're not the only one, and it's easier when you're able to talk to other people. So that's how I deal with it. There are days that are good, there are days that are not so good. Whenever I think of my grandparents, my mother, I have mixed emotions because of that. But otherwise, again, you know, I have a sister, I have a niece, two nieces actually, and they both have children, and my husband Bruce and I are proud godparents to 8 children, to 8 godchildren. So we're hoping that that generation will carry on also and carry on the traditions of our faith.
Thank you very much.
So, what's your name?
Samsara, and do you have any memory of your life before you guys left Hungary, like as a small child?
You know, I have some memories, yes, and not many, but they're very mundane. I remember skipping on a street, and I remember once my father and mother, I was about 4 years old, they took me to this lake, it's called Lake Balaton. And I had this cute little sailor outfit, which you guys don't know about those. It was a little dress, white dress, with a little blue stripe and a little jacket. And I was in one of those moods like, you know, 3 and 4 year olds are in. And I was pulling the jacket along the ground. And my father, who had never raised his finger or his hand at me, said to me, if you don't pick up your jacket, I'm going to spank you. He never did, because that wasn't him. But that's the memory that I have. Other memories, probably if I went through hypnosis or something, I would remember other things, but I don't remember too many things. And my husband and I went back to Hungary at my mother's request a few years ago. We went back to the town where I was born and where my grandfather was canted to try to retrace some of the steps. But unfortunately, a lot of time had passed, and a lot of political things had happened in the meantime. We tried to find the Jewish cemetery where my great-grandparents were buried. And unfortunately, a lot of the tombstones were turned upside down, and the books were in disrepair. But there is a memorial to the Holocaust victims, and my grandfather's name is on that plaque. It says Shmuel Glass and family.
So we had heard like some sort of letters like earlier, and they were talking about like revenge. Did you also have that feeling of revenge after you saw what your family has gone through, or as you move forward in life, do you think more about like the healing process of not only the Jewish community but also your own family?
What a great question. You must be a real top student. You know, for me, revenge is educating young people. I'm not looking for other revenge, just like Noor is looking at revenge and Michael at revenge as music. For me, revenge is education. And that's it. You know, you can't relive the past, but you have to learn from the past, otherwise the past will repeat itself. Does that answer your question? Okay. Anybody else? Thank you so much for your attention.
So it's really good time. Now, we have 5 minutes break.